Hello and welcome to the Great Birth Rebellion podcast, where we grapple with current research to help you get the best out of your pregnancy, birth and postpartum journey while still challenging the dominant birth culture. I'm your host, Dr Melanie Jackson at Melanie the Midwife, and I'm joined weekly by my co-host B from Core and Flora Store, and this is the Great Birth Rebellion. You can subscribe to our podcast from your favourite podcast platform and also to our mailing list. For those on our mailing list, we'll email out the reference list and some full text research articles from every episode. So join now at melaniethemidwife.com. Hello everyone out there in podcast land. I'm Melanie Jackson and thank you for joining B and myself for our very first podcast episode of the Great Birth Rebellion. Today, you'll get to meet us as we interview each other about ourselves. Hi, B.
Hi, Mel. Get excited, listeners. What you're hearing today is literally us getting to know each other. It's like our first coffee date. You're invited to our first date.
Totally. And when I was thinking about, I want to start this podcast, but I need a co-host because it's going to sound really dorky with just me talking to myself. I kept thinking about B, but I also thought, don't be an idiot and randomly just contact some Instagram personality and ask them if they want to be on your podcast. So it took me ages. And then when I finally did, B was like, yes, I'll do it. So, I mean, my first question to you, B, is why the heck would you agree to co-host a podcast with a complete stranger?
I think you need to tell everyone the full details, Mel.
What?
Mel messaged and had this incredible idea for a podcast, and I wrote back, yes, as long as I don't have to do any of the work. So everyone out there, what you're hearing every week is all of Mel's research and hard work. And I agreed, well, because I've always adored you, like even in like at the normal birth conference when I met you, like I knew of you. I knew you were doing things that I really respected. You were doing research that I respected. You were working with women and colleagues that I adored as friends. I love what you've done in the midwifery space. And so I was really honored and kind of blown away. And essentially what this is going to be is really fucking epic education for student midwives and families. And to be able to provide that to the world for free, like it's orgasmic for me. Like that's my clitoral jam.
Magic. Okay, we're going to have to start a dictionary and it'll be B-isms and let the record show.
I normally say all good in the clitoral hood. That's been my new saying lately, but I do have a lot of sayings. So
right, all good in the clitoral hood. And was it clitoral jam?
No, I don't think we'll do clitoral jam. I think we'll get rid of that one. That's why I wanted to do a podcast with you. That's why I said yes. But yeah, really, It's like 75%. Oh, look, let's be honest, 83% Mel, 17% me.
So one thing I want to do you talk about bottoms a lot and anuses, which we'll get to later. I'm very interested about itchy anuses. I don't know why, but I just remember seeing a video.
Oh, are you asking for a friend, Mel?
Get out. I remember seeing an Instagram video of you just like scratching the bot of a little mannequin, and I just thought, I need to put the sound on. What is she doing?
And then I smelt my fingers.
Yes, you smelt your fingers. And then you asked people if they were finger sniffers.
Was it you that posted when I put the picture of what your vulva looks like when it's scared and relaxed? Was that you that commented the best thing on the internet? Or you said, what is this?
I asked who let you on the internet. You said people pay me to be here. But so let's introduce ourselves, B.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, look. This is the first question. Where do you live?
In Queensland. I have lived all over though. So I'm originally from where you're from, really, which is, I grew up in Londonderry between Richmond and Penrith. But now I'm up in sunny, rainy coast Queensland.
And that's how we know each other kind of, because I live in the Blue Mountains. I didn't grow up in the Blue Mountains, but we have friends who are in the Penrith area. which is how we know those people, and those people know us. So there's one degree of separation.
Well, I studied at UTS in Sydney. I did a Bachelor of Midwifery in the UTS, and Jo Hunter, who is a good friend of both of us, who made Birth Time, her and I studied together. And then we were lectured by Hannah Darlin, who was your professor.
She was my PhD supervisor, and we worked in private practice, Hannah and I, for many, many years.
Yes.
That would mean then you've been a midwife for 13 years?
Yeah, I count my student years because they're really important. I and another midwife of mine, or student midwife at the time, two of us were awarded the first positions called assistant in midwifery. We were AIMS.
Ooh.
And we were the first two people in the country. New South Wales was the first one to trial it, where we got to be assistants in midwifery. And so I basically would work like 3 or 4 shifts a week, and I got to do booking in visits on my own. I got to work antenatal ward. So I did a lot of care, and I think this is why I am so beautiful at caring for people whose babies have passed, because I did a lot of terminations and cared for people who were mourning and experiencing the loss of a babe. So I did a lot of work on antenatal ward. I did a lot of work on postnatal, and I would do lots of night shifts. So I got to do all the good stuff. And so by the time I graduated, I had like 5 times more experience. And it's because I had all those extra hours of experience, but I wasn't confident with birth, because I think like the first birth I did, I was like pressing the button every time, like, because they just leave you in there, right? And like I could see like a strain of hair, and I just like kept pressing the assist button. And she was like, the baby's not coming anytime soon. Like, why are you calling me in here? And I was like, can you please just stay with me? Like, a baby's about to be born. And I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, I know I'm registered, but I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, because I did a graduate diploma in midwifery. So we actually had to work 4 days a week as we were employed as a student midwife for an entire year. So 4 shifts a week, 1 day a week at uni. I guess that first year was, our first year of midwifery, just like with you working as an AIM.
Yeah. And I just think like students are just so amazing. Yeah, I totally count my student years because I learned so much. So I was a student in 2007. So we're up to 15 years.
Beautiful.
What are you up to?
What am I? Well, so 14 years of midwifery total. But I've spent all of my midwifery career as a private practice midwife. I worked for that year as a student midwife in hospital, but then straight after graduating, I was out doing home births in private practice, which is really unusual. Wow. Yeah, so I don't have any current hospital experience. So I have basically only done full continuity of care. Right. It's never been disjointed for me. It's always been knowing the women's full story. I book them in. We go through the antenatal journey together. I'm there at their birth, and then I'm the one doing their postnatal care at the end up to 6 weeks. So, when they talk about gold standard, I feel like I've just grown up in it, and also learnt so much about true physiological pregnancy, birth and postpartum.
Which is, you have true midwifery skills, right? Like that's true midwifery. And if we look at how birth has been cared for the last 60,000 years, that's what women have had. Yeah, but so you were a nurse first. So how did you get into midwifery, and what was your career like before that?
So before I was a nurse, which I only became a nurse to become a midwife. So when I left school, I became a naturopath. So I did 3 years Bachelor of Health in naturopathy, and then decided, I was like, oh, I'd love to specialize in women and babies as a naturopath. And then I was like, oh, midwifery, but how do you get into midwifery? And so when I phoned and talked, actually, I spoke to UTS, and I was like, I want to do the Bachelor of Midwifery. I don't want to be a nurse. It wasn't in line with my philosophy. Then they said, well, no, you can't have any credits for your previous degree. You've already got a bachelor, but you have to do all the subjects again. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to get another bachelor. And I already had in my mind that maybe I would have an academic career at some point. And so I did a master's of nursing And then as soon as I finished that, I went in and did the graduate diploma of midwifery. And so it totaled 3 years of study. So I never planned on being a nurse. I always wanted to actually pair midwifery and naturopathy. And then what happened is I fell in love with midwifery, and I was trying to do both at the same time, and eventually just fell more in love with midwifery and pursued that full time while I did my PhD. And we set up a group practice. And while I was doing my PhD, I mentioned to Hannah Darlin, I want to set up this private practice, like group practice. She was like, oh my gosh, I'm in. I was like, what? I wasn't going to invite you. Like, I thought she had a really good thing. Like she was Hannah Darlin.
You're not invited, Hannah Darlin.
It was because of my own short failings. I was like, who am I to presume that Hannah Darlin would want to work in a group practice with me? Like, as if I'm like, what? Why would you want, So she's like, yeah, I'm in. So while I was doing my PhD, Hannah and I, and actually two other midwives, my other two midwifery mentors, Robin Dempsey and Jane Palmer, again, I ran this group. I invited every private midwife that I knew and said, basically, I want to start this group practice with private midwives. So basically, we're all here to support each other and our clients, and like we're all doing this together. Like, let's all survive. And I actually, again, it was similar with Robin and Jane. Is I saw them as like they already had their shit together. They did not need me in their lives. And all these midwives came, and most of them were like, no, we're not in. We don't want this kind of way of working. And so then I get this phone call from Robin, who was my mentor. She taught me how to be a private midwife. She's like, so me and Jane want to be in your group practice. I was like, what? You don't need me. And then boom, like I was there with Hannah Darlin, and then some of the most experienced private midwives in like my area, and we were in a group practice. I mean, I was like, what? How did I land here? So, I can really attribute my current situation to the love and investment of Hannah Darlin and Robin Dempsey and Jane Palmer. I still have a clique of midwives who we just like rely on each other. I think that's the trick to midwifery, is finding your people that will love you and invest in you. And then when you're in a position, then you love and invest in other people around you, because that's how midwives are going to survive. It's not like this, midwives eat their young mentality, which is what I was told too. I was like, midwives eat their young. I'm like, oh, great. What a survival strategy to like actually have a culture of tearing each other down. So I intentionally build a culture and engage with midwives who build me up and who I can build up. And anybody who doesn't fit that description, if I at all feel torn down or disrupted in someone's presence, I just go, do you know what? You're not my people.
So for those who are listening to this who aren't midwives or don't know who Hannah Darlin is, like in terms of midwifery, she's like, one of the queens. She's very respected. She's done incredible research, incredible practice. She's like got an Order of Australia. She is one of the most approachable people ever. And, she's always been like that with me. She's been like that with you. She'll be like that with everyone. And, I remember seeing you start that practice, and I knew all the others. Like I knew Jane, I knew Hannah, and I was like, and I knew Robin, and like you could, because they were all the women we idolized. And I was like, who is this Melanie Jackson?
Right?
How do I not know about her? I know about all these other midwives. She might, like, where has she come from?
Yeah.
And I just remember I was so jealous, because I was like, I want to work in private practice with those midwives. Like, how did you do this? And that is how you and that's
an idea.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful, beautiful story and an incredible midwifery journey. It's so nurtured and loved and nourished. And I wish every midwife had that same, because how incredible would our maternity care system be if it was all like that?
I just think everyone needs a midwifery mama, and that's who they are. They're like my midwifery mamas. And it's just like, they gave me so much time. You've got to have these people in your life who is going to Yeah, these people who are going to just like keep you focused. So B, I have another question for you. So
do you want me to say how I got into mid? Do you want me to answer that one first?
How did you get into midwifery?
Because I fell into it. I'm an accidental midwife. I didn't even know what midwifery was. I was a very high achiever in school and got incredible UAI, and the pressure that society puts on you when you're deemed as intelligent at school is quite large. But I basically got I basically got a scholarship to study sports psychology at CDU in Bathurst. And so I knew I loved sport and I love the psychology, and really looking at the start of my career, and I've pretty much done a full circle with what I'm doing now. It's incredible how you like come back to it. But so I was studying sports psychology in Bathurst for a year, and then my girlfriends and I decided we'd go to Utah and do a ski season. So we went, and I was a ski technician, and this family came up and they were like, "You're really good with our children. Do you want to move to New York? We've got 5." And I was like, yes, I do. And so I came back home, quit uni, quit scholarship. And really, I look back at it and I was like, I was so burnt out. Like I had been studying my ass off. I met them, and some of them may, like one of the 5 kids may listen to this, so I've got to be a little bit careful here, but they were extremely wealthy. Like we lived next to LL Cool J. My kids did, surfing with Michael J. Fox. We'd go to like Knicks games and sit like just behind Adam Sandler and Jamie Foxx, and it was, so I met them and they were like, you'll have your own like level of our 5-story house in New York, and we'll go to Spain, and we're going to go to Turks and Caicos, and and I was like, oh yeah, I'm coming. So I like went home. I went home, I packed up all my stuff. And it was intense. Like I had my own house in the Hamptons on the water next to theirs for 3 months of the year. I was like, because studying sports psychology, I was like, I'm going to be a career woman. My kids are going to be in daycare full time, because I wanted to be a sports psychologist for tennis stars and golf stars, but because that's where the money was at. And so I was determined to be the best of the best and make the most of the most in terms of money. And then I got to see this incredible world, and I was like, oh, I don't want this. I don't want money. I don't want to have kids that don't see me. That year of my pivotal in making who I am today. Yeah, I walked away from that year. Now, during my time there, I watched Meet the Fuckers, one night. And at the start of Meet the Fuckers, he catches a baby. I didn't message my mum because I don't think text messages are that around. I probably wrote her a letter, but I messaged her and said, I've just watched this movie. I'm going to become an obstetrician. That looks really cool, right? So I watched Meet the Fuckers. He catches a baby in ED, and for some reason I was like, that's what I want to do. And then I watched this Madonna special, and she was in Haiti, and I was like, oh, I want to do that in poor countries. And then my mum sent me Catherine Hamlin's book, Hospital by the River.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, I'm just going to move to Ethiopia and do it. That's it. That's my life. Done. Boom. Yeah, I got back and I applied to do medicine. I was working at Bunnings full time, and I just had this huge anxiety attack in the middle of one of the aisles, and I started stripping, and I rang my mom and I was like, I can't breathe. Like my chest, like something's really wrong. Like my rib cage is breaking or something. Like I didn't know what it was. And she came down and like met me in the aisle, and she was like, I was like, by that stage, I was like taking off clothes, like, what the fuck is going on? And I just remember her calming me down, and I was like, I can't do this. I can't do medicine. It's because in this time I'd reached out to Catherine Hamlin, and she'd written back, and I'd messaged her and said, can I come now and can I study there in Ethiopia? And had she had said yes, I would have been there. So I was like, okay, so that's how I kind of went into medicine in Australia, but it wasn't what I wanted. And so I remember being at home, and I'd gone to see a careers counselor. She kind of gave me some support, but she didn't know about midwifery. And then literally I was flicking through the UAC book, just kind of like flicking and opening to a page and flicking and opening to a page, and it landed on midwifery. And I was like, oh, midwifery. That looks exactly the same as obstetrics. I'll just do that. So yeah, I fell into midwifery, and as a woman at that time, I would have had a private obstetrician and an elective cesarean based on my imprint of what birth was. And then I was taught by Carolyn Homer and Nikki Leap and Pat Brody and Hannah Darlin and Ali Tate. They were all my lecturers. And then I was like, I want to be a home birth midwife, and I want to have a home birth. And so yeah, that is how I got into mid. And I was sitting next to Ali Tate on the bus up to the home birth rally back in 2009 in Canberra when home birth was meant to become illegal. Yes. So her and I were sitting next to each other. She was like, why don't you go to Darwin? I've just been up there. They've got a birth centre. They've got caseload. And so I contacted Darwin, and they were like, we don't have any new grad positions, but you can just come and work here. And I was like, okay. And so I packed out my little RAV4 and I drove to Darwin without knowing anyone. And then, my career. So I worked in Alice Springs as a remote outreach midwife. That time that I did that role was incredible. Like, I'd sit with one woman under a tree outside and do antenatal education. I was like, wow, midwifery can be so much. Like, there is so much that you can do. And I learned so much from Aboriginal women. Like, they were so kind to me in where they took me and what they taught me. But I missed birth. So I came back to Alice Springs, and they've got what I still consider the best continuity of care model in a public system. So they had continuity of care for women out in remote Aboriginal communities, but it also had home birth. So it was my dream job. And so I did that for a long time. And then I was like, I'd met my now husband in Darwin, but so I was trying to figure out how I could work in low income countries and still honour why I'd really gotten into midwifery. And then Australian Volunteers International had jobs, and there was a 2-year professor or lecturer. It wasn't professor, sorry. It was a lecturer position in Ethiopia. And I applied and I got it. And it was a month before our wedding. And my husband was like, oh, yeah. So about that, I can't go. Yeah, I just can't go to a city with 90 million people. And I was like, oh, okay. And it just so happened that there was a position in the Solomon Islands, which was on a surf break. So my husband's a surfer, and it wasn't the same, but it was midwifery education. And I was like, okay, I'll go there. And in hindsight, it was the biggest blessing. And we got to have this incredible life where we lived on a tiny island with no electricity and no running water and only a Pinards and no CGGs and no Dopplers and no scent machines and nothing. And I thought I thought I really knew physiological birth, and I really knew how strong women were and how resilient babies were. But that year just smashed it into my face. And then I went from there straight into a massive tertiary referral hospital in Melbourne. And so that was it was an epic job, and I loved it, but it was so hard for me because I'd gone from one extreme to the other. So I was there, and then I had my baby, my first baby, and then we moved to country Victoria, and I worked in a GP. Basically, it was a private setting under a public hospital. So GP obstetricians. Now I'm in the sunny coast running Corn for Store, which I'm sure we'll get to. But so unlike you, I've had it all. But yeah, and now I have a podcast with you, which is incredible.
Yeah, from there, when you didn't even know what midwifery was.
Midwifery.
Sure.
So I know I've talked forever, but it was a very long story, and I got it out.
Thanks, B. I had no idea.
So right. I should throw in there, I do have an honours degree that I've published, and I did my research around the Alice Springs midwifery group practice, and I have a master's in public health too. So I don't know whether the PhD will happen, but maybe.
PhD, so because I have done a PhD, and Hannah Darlin was one of my supervisors. So I accidentally fell into a PhD, just like you accidentally fell into midwifery. I remember sitting at, they have a careers day at the end of midwifery where they kind of lay out all your possible options. And a few months before that day, I got called into the office of one of our lecturers, and they're like, what are you going to do when you finish midwifery? And I was like, I'm going to be a home birth midwife. What do you mean? She's like, have you considered a postgraduate degree? She's like, what about a PhD? And I said to her, well, what's that? And she's like, well, it's like this degree, and you become a doctor of whatever it is, you do a PhD. And I said to her, no, look, that's not me. I can't do that. That's not me. And I remember her looking at me, and she said, have you met some of the idiots doing PhDs? And I was like, no, I really haven't. I haven't met an idiot doing a PhD. I thought that was for smart people. And I didn't realize that I was that person, but everybody else was saying, like, you should be doing this. I'm like, no, that's not me. So she said, look, just go and see Hannah Darlin. Go and see her. Just talk to her about it. And then we come to this careers day and Hannah's standing up the front going, you could do, higher degree research as a midwife. So I approached her. I was like, look, somebody suggested that I should do a PhD and you seem to know what that is. And she's like, come visit, come see me, bring your transcript. So I went and saw her, brought her my transcript. She goes, yeah, you should do a PhD. What do you want to do it in? I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. So she said, go home, have a think about it. Call me when you have a topic. And then I sat up one night in the middle of the night and just went, birthing outside the system. And I woke my husband up. I'm like, I've got it. It's birthing outside the system. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, my PhD, it's birthing outside the system. So the next day I walked into Hannah's office and I said, I've got it. It's birthing outside the system. And she looked at me and her eyes got all wide and she went, yes, it's happening. Good. All right, we'll fill in the paperwork. So there was all this excitement and all this like motivation because I was a home birth midwife and I'm like going to study birth outside the system and this is my trajectory. And then I applied and I didn't get in. I was like, what? Okay. Hannah goes, don't worry. She said, don't let this discourage you. I said, oh, no, I'm not. I said, what do we need to do? She goes, right, you are going to be my research assistant this year. So Hannah, I just graduated midwifery. I was being mentored by Robin to be a home birth midwife and I was taking on these clients. And Hannah's like, you are going to work for me as my research assistant. So we did all this research all year and we published papers and I was like sneaking into hospitals and watching women birth for all this research that we were doing. And those publications and that experience then when I applied the following year, got into the PhD scholarship. Hannah was my supervisor, had a baby while I was doing my PhD and I was still seeing clients and I lectured a little bit. We need to keep doing this at some point because I have all these other questions that I want to ask you, B. Okay, we should do a 2-minute wrap up. Who is B? What do you do for a living? Your family, like nutshell, if you had to introduce yourself.
Okay, so hi, my name's B, short for Bernadette. Most people don't know that. And I'm going to say this here because I always get asked. There's 2 really interesting stories that I have in my life, but I'm completely deaf in my left ear. And so sometimes I yell. And the reason for that is because I got what I assume is cytomegalovirus when I was 7. And so I got a really high fever and the nerves were killed. That side of my face doesn't really feel like it works. So I'm totally deaf in my left ear. And the other really cool story about me is I was bitten by a snake when I was 12 and I survived. So I have 2 epic boys called Amos and Aloysius, but we call them Banjo and Louie. Banjo and Louie. So Banjo is 5. Louis is 18 months and I have my favorite person in the whole world is my lover, also husband friend. His name is Michael, but he goes by Mr. Core and Floor. Yeah. And right now I run Core and Floor Restore. So I have online pregnancy, preconception, postpartum and men's exercise and education programs. I do live classes. I do coaching around motherhood. So looking at mum rage, self-care, setting healthy boundaries, feelings and trust. I do birth debriefs and birth preparation chats. I do a lot around prolapse and diastasis recti and incontinence. So I do one-on-one chats all around that. There is a lot happening in the company. We have an online store with all your pregnancy, birth, postpartum needs. Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot that's to Core and Floor. There's a lot of free resources that I do. I did free antenatal classes. If you haven't watched them, please do. They've been watched by 70,000 people worldwide. I did them just to be kind so people would decrease their risk of birth trauma, and they've been a huge hit. So they're available on my website. That is me. I don't know. Amazing. What else. There's so much to say. Who are you?
Who are you, Mel? Me.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name's Melanie Jackson, and I'm allowed to call myself Dr. Melanie Jackson, but it makes me always feel funny. It doesn't feel like part of my identity, but Rachel Reed said I have to embrace it. So, so Dr. Melanie Jackson. So I'm a doctor of midwifery. So I'm still now a midwife. The bulk of my income comes from being a private midwife. So women hire me to be their private midwife. I mostly do home births. So I'm on call 24/7 and just going out to whoever needs me. And the other part of my work currently is I run a mentorship. It's an online mentorship for all midwives in Australia who want to move from working in hospital to working as a private midwife. And it's a full year. It's online, and we meet monthly, and they have email access to me. And so essentially by the time they finish the mentorship, they're in a fully functioning business, and they have everything they need to be a private midwife here in Australia. So that's been running for 2 years, and there's been 78 midwives who have been through that mentorship, and a lot of them have gone into private practice. It actually, it works. Like halfway through, midwives are like, I've done it. I started the business. I've got my first client. I've set this up. I've got an ABN. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And I'm like, I can't believe it. This is working. So that's the other half of what I do. And then obviously I'm a total research nerd, so I love to express that on Instagram. And I really feel the divide between how people who are in research can access research, but then people who aren't in it can't get access to full text journal articles and don't know how to interpret research. And so one of my things that I really want to do on Instagram is actually have research, interpret it, and sort of try and give as much as I possibly can out for free so people can make their decisions for themselves. Okay. So that's me. That's in my work life. And I have also 2 children. Charlie is 9 and Frida is 5. And we homeschool our kids. My husband also works for himself, so we kind of balance like who's going to be home with the kids at any one time. They were both born at home, which just felt right because I was a home birth midwife.
So am mine. I should say that. Yeah.
Oh, both born at home? Okay, yeah. So baby's born at home.
Both my boys are born at home. Banjo was a 36-weeker at home, if you want to know. And
Charlie too.
Yeah, wow.
36-weeker. Charlie, my first was 36-weeker at home.
And I reckon that's how I learned about you, because you had acupuncture during your labor.
Did, yes.
Yes, I remember that was like the first time I had like any kind of entry into your life. I was like, who is this incredible woman? How did she do that? That's amazing. Wow. Because you're at 10 centimeters for a while, and then you had acupuncture and birthed him. Is that right?
Yes. So I was in labor and it had been going on for ages, and he was 36 weeks. And then like the morning that I had him in the evening, but that morning the midwife did a vaginal exam and she's like, you're 10 centimeters. But I was like, well, where are the contractions? Literally 10 centimeters dilated, no contractions. And we got, long story short, the acupuncturist came in the afternoon, and 2.5 hours later he was out. I finally got contractions back.
But we have to go. I have to go to work. This has just been crazy. So good. I just want to keep talking to you.
Next episode, we are talking about models of care of the full spectrum, all the way from free birth to obstetric birth in hospitals. And we're going to go through all the philosophies, and it's going to be epic. So we will see you next episode. We'll chat soon. Okay.
The Great Birth Rebellion. Yeah, that's fine. All right, I gotta go.
See you, love. Bye. And that concludes the first episode of The Great Birth Rebellion, where you got a little bit of an insight into the life of myself and Bea from Core and Floor Restore. If you loved this episode or want to keep listening to other episodes, you can subscribe to our podcast on all of your favorite platforms, and also to our mailing list, where we send out extra special information every week to the people on the mailing list. You can do that at www.melaniethemidwife.com. We'll see you in our next episode, where we have a big discussion about birth philosophies, care providers, birthplace options, and everything in between. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.